Well, thank you for joining us for the May 2022 TAM customer webinar, where we'll be learning more about Project Ensemble from one of our favorite repeat webinar speakers, John Diaz. He's done great presentations in the past. We look forward to today's as well. Before we get into the content, I want to review a few of the regular housekeeping announcements. First of all, our next TAM customer webinar will be on June 9th, and Cato Grace will be bringing us up to date on VMware's disaster recovery solutions. So be sure and watch for the invite details from your TAM on that session. And John has made it clear today that your questions are strongly encouraged. So please make use of the Q&A feature of Zoom to ask your questions. And if for some reason your question doesn't get addressed today, be sure and reach out to your TAM and ask them to follow up. We want to make sure we get those answered. At the end of today's session, you will be prompted to fill out a simple 2-question survey related to the value you received from this session. And we really, really appreciate you taking a minute to do that. And lastly, this webinar is being recorded, and your TAM can make the private YouTube link available to you right away. And then after a few months, we do make the recordings publicly available on the VMware TAM Services YouTube channel, where you can find our complete history of recordings. With that covered, I'll turn things over to John to introduce us to Project Ensemble.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Hey, greetings, everyone. Wherever you are, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. My name is John Diaz. I am a senior staff technical marketing architect with the Cloud Management Business Unit at VMware. And joining me today to help with Q&A is my product marketing manager counterpart, Ellie Ruano. Ellie, do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm happy to be with you. Just feel free to ask questions in the Q&A, and this is an engaging conversation, so we'll sometimes may bring those up live directly to John.
Yeah, absolutely. I love getting questions and making this useful for the people who are watching. So if there's something you want to know more about, let's dive into it by all means. So just a disclaimer here, you may or may not be under NDA. The technology or the solution or the IP that I'm about to show you has been announced at VMworld. So it's not really under NDA. However, what I'm showing you could change. It could change in a minor way, or it could change dramatically. So don't make any purchases, any plans to purchase this until we actually offer it, make it available in its final form. This is just a preview of what we're working on here. So, okay, with that out of the way, there's kind of 3 things that I'm going to talk about for Project Ensemble, and what it's delivering for our cloud management customers at VMware. And we'll talk a little bit about like what we'll see in the first iteration and where it's also going like long-term. What's the vision for this? Okay, so we'll get a little visionary with it. And then I'll do some live demo as well of both the API and the UI for the product as it stands today. So if you're a vRealize customer, you're certainly a VMware customer, probably running VMware, vSphere, hopefully on using VMware Cloud Foundation or VMware Cloud on AWS, for example, a hybrid option. And also with that, you hopefully are also using vRealize. And vRealize provides a lot of capabilities to help manage not only your private cloud, but those hybrid clouds and even public cloud from a single kind of management control plane. And there are 4 pillars for that, or 4 tenets as we call them, for that management plane. There's delivery, performance, cost, and security. And so these are the key capabilities that vRealize, our cloud management solution, strives to focus on and provide for our customers. And of course, it's comprised of the products you see there, vRealize Automation, vRealize Operations, vRealize Log Insight, and vRealize Network Insight. Now you'll notice that those are referred to in their cloud formats. And just keep in mind that when I talk about Ensemble is a service and will be a service, or is planned to be a service that is offered in the cloud. Okay, so that our goal is to leverage our cloud services along with the Ensemble service. And one of the things, though, with all of these services is today, and again, if you're a vRealize customer, you're probably really aware of this. You may have, you don't really have a integrated view from like a single console. So in other words, like if you're using vRealize Operations Cloud, you can monitor the different clouds that are out there, your VCF environments, your VMware cloud on Dell or AWS, and even public clouds, as I mentioned. But it doesn't give you a lot of insight into the other data collected from those same clouds by the other solutions, right? So there's some integration, but the integration is direct between, say, vRealize Operations Cloud and vRealize Automation Cloud, and then vRealize Network Insight Cloud may feed information into vRealize Operations Cloud, as well as vRealize Automation Cloud, but vRealize Operations Cloud isn't aware of the information that's being provided to vRealize Automation. So it's integrated, but it's not congruent. There's not a commonality of the way that these products intercommunicate and interconnect, and they all have, out of necessity, their own views of your environment, your clouds. They have different UIs, different workflows for managing those clouds, because they're performing different tasks and they're used by different personas. Okay, so it's out of necessity. But wouldn't it be great if we could take all of that data that is collected and managed, and in a lot of cases created by these different solutions, these different services, and connect them all to a common backplane, a common data backplane. And that common data backplane would be used to fully understand a more complete picture of the relationships between objects, and we'll call those entities, or we do call those entities in Ensemble, that exist in the cloud. So think about it this way. If you deploy a virtual machine in vCenter, that virtual machine exists as an object in the vCenter database, and it has metadata associated with it. It has an identifier, actually a few identifiers. It has a set of relationships that are cataloged. It has tagging data, metadata, and so forth. When I start to monitor that in vRealize Operations Cloud, that same VM, I do pull in, vRealize Operations Cloud does pull in some of that metadata from the vCenter database, but it may also add additional details about relationships, calculated metrics, additional properties, alerts, insights, and so forth that are unique to vRealize Operations Cloud. So if you extrapolate that across all the products, then we kind of end up with these little islands of additional information that would be helpful to know from an administrator standpoint. Okay, so what we're talking about here is doing just that. All of these services share a common data model, a CMDB for the cloud, if you will. Is one way to look at it. Not quite a CMDB in that sense, but it's probably the easiest way to initially wrap your mind around it. And then in that common database, we're able to track events, changes, relationships, interdependencies, application topologies, and so forth at this, green layer. And that's really what Ensemble is doing, is it's adding, it's providing a common data model, and it's actually called the Entity Data Service. If you read, I've got a couple of blogs out there, and Ellie, maybe you can throw those in the chat, the link to those. And I talk in detail about that. Okay, thank you. I talk in detail about that, what that means in terms of the architecture, right? And so be sure to check that out if you want to know more about what that technology is and what it enables. Okay, but hopefully you get a high level, understanding of it. But once we have that common data repository and all this information has been rationalized, and basically that single VM object that we talked about earlier is truly a single VM entity, okay, that has all the data from all the other systems that are managing and monitoring that virtual machine, plus any objects related to that virtual machine. We can now present that at a presentation plane to the personas that need to investigate that. So Ensemble also strives to provide a common UI as a basis for entry into the vRealize cloud management plane or suite, right? And so what we want to do is surface up critical information from each of the services, right? But Ensemble also strives to extrapolate the information that it's receiving from all the services to add some intelligence to that and provide additional information. And we call those insights, business insights about those applications. And by the way, this is very application focused. So what we want to do is we up level this information to these personas. We want to make it less about the infrastructure and the virtual machines and all that stuff, and more about what's relevant to the business or the organization. And that's the application. Okay. Any questions so far about kind of the high level overview? Okay. Looks like none so far.
I had one question, but I believe you've answered it live, John. And just to repeat, the question was, so is this where we finally get unified metadata, the holy grail we've been talking about for years?
Yeah, Mike, you nailed it. That's exactly. And when I first learned about this from our office of the CTO, I was like, this is what is going to really make vRealize just explode. And not only vRealize, but as you can imagine, now it is easier to integrate other VMware products and other management tools into that entity data service. So you can kind of see from a future standpoint where this could eventually go off into. So that's a good observation.
John, we have one more question here. Dan asks, how do management packs work with this? Say we have VxRail or vRealize for Horizon that's being used. Does this get pulled into VMware Cloud to be seen?
Yeah. Hey, Dan. Yeah. So that is a great question. So one thing to remember about Ensemble is it is not replacing any of the services or capabilities, the vRealize services or anything that they do. Those will continue to operate as they have been. And that means management packs for vRealize operations will continue to reside within vRealize operations. And yes, that does mean that information collected, data collected from those, those extensions, those management packs could also be surfaced up into the entity data store, into Ensemble. Today, as you can imagine, we're starting off at very high level or very simply with virtual machines and applications. But eventually, yes, I would expect that we would start to bring in additional extensibility data from not only vRealize operations, but all of the products that have some level of extensibility. So,
One key point here to note is this is in the cloud. It is a SaaS version, and the on-prem edition is not on the roadmap.
Yeah, that's correct. That is correct. Yeah. So this is our march toward the cloud, if you will. I see a question from Gopi, and I'll go ahead and take that. Does an agent need to be installed on the VM container? No, absolutely not. So, Ensemble does not require any agents to be installed. Now, there may be agents required by vRealize operations for, Telegraph to do monitoring. There's Salt minions if you're using Salt Stack with vRealize automation, et cetera. But that is outside of the context of Ensemble. Ensemble itself is collecting data directly from the services. It's not going out to any of the managed entities directly. It's not bypassing, VR ops or any of that stuff. So no agents would be required in that case. Let's talk about the what we're delivering, kind of and you see here it says key use cases. But these are some of the capabilities that, in talking to our customers, the kinds of things that they need to be able to do to manage multi-cloud, right? And you'll see first and foremost is that app and resource discovery. And that we have that capability today in things like vRealize Network Insight, vRealize Operations Service Discovery, for example, and vRealize Automation actually deploys applications, right? So think about, we've got 3 different services that have their own concept of what an application is, and Ensemble looks to take and rationalize that into a single application with the information from each of those services to help curate and make sure that what we're portraying is a complete and accurate visualization of that application or understanding of that application. Okay. Migration planning and execution, the visibility performance management, the cost and capacity management, and the multi-cloud management. What I'll say about those, and you can kind of read what our goals are there. Think of Ensemble as a platform and not a product with an SKU, associated with it. Ensemble is an enabler that basically provides a platform for our services, not only to interoperate, as we talked about with the current vRealize services, but also going forward and in the VMworld timeframe, you're going to see us announce new services and new capabilities that will leverage Ensemble for that, for that entity data service, for those business insights, et cetera, and provide even more capabilities around some of these that I talked about, the migration planning, cost and capacity management, governance, that kind of thing. So I can't really say too much more about that. That is strictly NDA at this point. But the important takeaway from that is that Ensemble is a platform, not a service that you will buy and use solo. And the way that we're actually going to offer this is through the vRealize Cloud Universal subscription. Okay. So that's the current plan, is that you will get the Ensemble capability with a vRealize Cloud Universal subscription. Details about that are, being worked out, the different, what level of subscription will you get it at and so forth. But that is currently the plan. But again, I really want to emphasize Ensemble is not a product, it's a platform. It's an enabler for our other services. So hopefully that makes sense. If not, I'm happy to clarify if you have questions about that. Okay, so what are some, key outcomes or key surface areas for these capabilities? One of the main ones that we're striving for in the initial iteration of Project Ensemble is to provide that unified workspace. Okay, this is the launch pad for vRealize, if you want to think of it that way, because you'll be able to see details about your applications or your infrastructure. Okay, so both of those views are available. We can see that when we go do the demo. But that's persona driven, right? So if I'm an app owner, I don't necessarily care as much, my first level of interest would be in the applications. So that's what would surface up for me. And I can see all the great information from all of the products they're providing, details about that in a consolidated place, and get those business insights that help me understand if my application is healthy, if not, why not? And then actionable, recommendations that I can take to address that. Most importantly is for, let's say, the cloud admin or the infrastructure admin, if they are looking at this information, let's say about an application or about some infrastructure component, and they want to get more detail, or they need to go into the specific service that provides key or unique capabilities to solve a problem. Let's say they want to know more about network flows, and they want to set some network policies or do some additional queries or set up additional queries. They can launch in context into vRealize Network Insight Cloud from this workspace. Okay, so we're not replacing any of the services. What we're doing is providing a place to more easily navigate your applications, your clouds, and then as needed launch into those services. Our belief is that this will make consumption of the vRealize services much easier. We think it will drive adoption and usage of the services because it'll be more of a guided experience. Instead of just saying, well, you look at vRealize Operations Cloud for this, you look at Network Insight Cloud for that. For logs, you go to the Log Insight Cloud. You come to one place, and from there, if you want to drill in, then it'll launch in context to the appropriate tool. Again, we're doing this from a persona-based view. So there's in the cloud world, the way that we describe it is there are cloud providers and there are cloud consumers. Okay, so we also want consumers to be able to leverage this same UI, and have this same experience. So they will be able to come in and do their own monitoring of their applications, triaging those, some level of communication between the people who are responsible for underlying cloud or infrastructure, to communicate, back and forth about particular issues or problems, perform actions, okay, that they're authorized to perform. Okay, so think about in vRealize Automation Cloud, you can, do any number of things from connecting to the remote console to rebooting to taking snapshots to even resizing virtual machines or the application or adding more virtual machines to an application, et cetera. And so that'll all be controlled through the vRealize Automation Cloud project construct. Okay. So if you're not familiar, in vRealize Automation Cloud, a project is a grouping of users that dictates which clouds those and resources those users can have access to, they can deploy workloads to, what they can deploy, how much capacity they can use, what actions they can take on those, and so forth. So it's the policy that governs what an individual application owner can do. So we're taking that and we're going to up level that into the Ensemble UI and expose actions there based on the RBAC controls for the projects in vRealize Automation Cloud. I mentioned that this is application centric. And so hopefully by now it's pretty clear. I've said the word application enough that you understand that we want this to be the solution that ties, IT to the business in a meaningful way. Okay. Because at the end of the day, your business or organization really only cares about the applications that their customers are using or that they're using for internal processes to achieve the goals and mission of the organization. And so that's why we feel that it's important to take the applications and provide them as an abstraction above any of the clouds that they're running on, the multiple clouds that they're running on. And so that's why app discovery is a critical component in this initial phase, of Ensemble. We want to be able to nail that down and accurately portray those applications up to the business and the application owners in a way that makes sense to them. We talked about that, inventory, that common data plane, the entity data service. And one of the things that is, I don't know if it's unique about Ensemble, it's certainly something we've talked about a lot at VMware is, kind of an API first mentality. I can tell you the engineering team has really put that into practice. The API that you use, which is GraphQL, and we'll look at it in a minute. Now, I also have a blog that explains details about that, is actually the same API calls that are used to surface information in the user interface. Okay. So truly, if you can do it in the UI, you can do it in the API because it was in the API first. Okay. And I know for me, using really any products, not just vRealize products, but any products from any software publisher, it's frustrating to try to do something in the API that you can do in the UI because they haven't published it in the API. You won't find that to be a problem with Ensemble. Okay, so we'll look at that. So let's get in. If there are no questions, let's get into the demo. And we'll start. Let me sign into cloud services here to the UI, but because we're talking about the API first approach and the common data model, I find it helpful to look at this through the lens of the API. So let me get into, I got timed out here. So, oh, CMView, there we go. Okay. So the API is built around GraphQL, and basically, if you aren't familiar, GraphQL is a query focused API that is, as the name would imply, really excels or intentionally built for graph type data stores. Okay, so a graph in computer science or mathematics is a term that you can go off and kind of research on your own, but it's basically the foundation for the entity data store, that green bar that I talked about earlier in the presentation. Okay, it allows us to more easily connect related entities together and to scale at very, very high scale in terms of the information that is stored in that database. If you're familiar with REST, and by the way, if you're not, you use REST every day when you open up a browser, because that's usually doing a get to get content from a website. It's doing a post to send information to a website, or to launch a query against a website. It's doing a patch to update that information. It may be doing deletes. So there are a list of verbs associated with HTML. Okay. In GraphQL, we have 3 verbs. There's query, which is pretty much the big, as the name would imply, that's what we're really doing here, is querying information from that backend graph database. There's a mutation, and a mutation is an action. Think of it like, maybe a post or a patch. You are asking the API to perform some action instead of just passively sending you information back. And then finally, there's a subscription. And the subscription allows you to, as the name would imply, subscribe to an entity in the database. And if some property changes, the subscription will push that change out to you. Okay, so this could be very helpful for monitoring, updating, external CMDBs, for example, that sort of thing. So the subscription is a very powerful capability. So what I want to do is I want to show you, though, because I know if you're not really comfortable with APIs and JSON and all that stuff, this looks a little intimidating, but it's really not that. It's not that bad. You do have a documentation explorer over here that shows you, like, for example, here's all the different queries that you can perform. I can query entities. I can query actions, what actions are available. I can look up statistic, metrics basically on those, et cetera. There's a hyperlink query that would give me the in context link into, say, the associated vRealize product of where I would launch into that product. So lots of cool little queries that you can perform here. And then the mutations are basically around the actions themselves. So think about, we were talking about earlier, starting a VM, stopping a VM, opening the console, et cetera. So those types of things are action mutations. And then, we talked about the subscriptions, subscribing to changes for the entities or those business insights. And I don't think I've spent a lot of time talking about business insights, but remember, that's a key capability that Ensemble will have, is to take all the information we've collected from all about an entity from all of the sources, and we're observing the change feed from all of those sources, from vRealize operations, network insight, et cetera. And then we're applying some AI to that will provide these insights about, hey, that looks like a potential problem here. Here's what you should do about it, et cetera. So you can subscribe to those as well. First thing you have to do, though, is you have to, and I'll try to give us more screen room here. You have to log in to this, and to basically log in, and let me clear out my request header here. In order to log in, you run an authentication query. So I'm going to close this. And what's nice about this UI, this is the UI that you can use to kind of explore and play around. You could also use Postman for this as well, but this is the GraphQL UI. And in the blog, I also provide links to other like GraphQL APIs that you can kind of play around with. Like GitHub has one, and there's other ones for, like, I don't know, funny stuff like Harry Potter or a movie database and stuff like that. So you want to just play around just in general GraphQL, you can do it there. But one nice thing about this is that it'll keep the history of your queries, kind of like Postman does, I guess. And then you can surface those back up and run them again. With this particular one, the first time that you hit this GraphQL page, we provide a little quick tutorial that shows you like how to log in, so because that's the first thing you need to do. And then it gives you an example of a query that you can run, and then some keyboard shortcuts and so forth. But what I want to do here is just authenticate. And so once I have that query, this is a mutation, basically. And once I have that, I'll send that. Oops, it gives me unauthenticated. And that's because I need to clear out my old header. Okay, and it'll give me a bearer token. Okay, all I need to do is just pop that into this headers field here, and then I'm ready to go. So I can select everything, and let's just start off with a query. Now, one thing you'll notice here is this interface will actually prompt you for what to put in next. So we start off with query, and then if I hit the shift space, it'll say, okay, these are all the queries you can run. So let's do an entity query, because we want to see what kind of entities are out there. And we're going to do query entities. Remember, in the docs, we did query, entity query, and it shows me you can query entities or you can search entities. And then it shows you the filters and conditions that you can put into that query. So let's add some. Let's say, well, I want to do not by entity name. Let's do entity type. And the entity type is a VMware Ensemble VM. Now, this typing, you'll notice it's hierarchical, and it's intended to be extensible, or it is extensible. So you can imagine that this VMW, which stands for VMware, could be replaced by some other company, at the top level, or some other product. This, which is the service name, Ensemble, could be replaced by vRealize Operations, VRNI, et cetera. And then the VM, which is, the actual construct or the entity that we're looking for, would be the last thing. So this can be basically extended to anything you want, this schema, if you will. So I want to look for VM entities in my environment. And by default, you see here that it gives me the first 10. So what I may want to do is say, well, I want a few more than that. So give me the first 20. Now, what do I want to see about those entities? Okay, so it's going to return some entities. And I can say, well, I'd like to see the entity ID, the entity name. What else might I want to see? Well, let's just go with that for now. Let's just say I want to see the name and the ID. If I run this query, it'll come back and show me, all these wonderful entities. Now, I only got the first 20. There are literally thousands of VM entities in this particular environment. So one thing I could do is say, well, I want to see VM entities that have this iperf or iperf in the name. So I can actually add a filter here. And then that filter, I can specify that the field entity name should, and you add an operator, contain, and you'll notice that it's popping up and it's prompting me, which is like super helpful. I'm not having to go out to Google, or anything like that, or any websites to get some help or some sample code. And then the field, what value am I looking for in the field? And it should contain iperf. Okay. So now let's run that. Oh, string cannot.
I think you've got field twice.
Oh, I do. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you. I was like, what? Okay. Values. Value is what I want. Okay. So the value should, for that field, should contain iperf. And field entity name operator. I probably screwed this up. Entity name. I like that for some reason. Field. Okay, I can't tell you how many times I practiced this before this demo, and it worked. But what's nice is I can go out to my history here, and I can find a previous query. Here we go. Here's a. Oh, I think I hadn't. That was my problem. I didn't put that in quotes. It's a string, which it tells me here, so I should have known. Okay. And now I'm unauthenticated. Hang on a second. Okay.
John, while you're doing that, there is one question of, is there a UI for this? So is this a different UI than Ensemble?
This is the API for Ensemble, and just wanted to show a couple examples of the API, and then we'll look at the UI, which is right here. It's very pretty, as you'll see. And it's basically performing the same queries that I'm performing directly in the API. But so we'll look at this in detail in a minute. Okay. So now I've basically gotten, here's all the entities that have iperf in the name. But let's say I want to get specific information about a specific entity. I can just say, well, give me, forget all this filtering, and let's do entity ID, and then the entity ID. Now, that's great, but what I want to know, like this is the Ensemble. It's an Ensemble virtual machine, but where is it getting information? Where is that actually coming from? So what we want to, what we can do here is we can say, well, which other services are feeding this information about this Ensemble entity? So I can say, well, show me those other entity names and entity types. And you'll see when it comes back, it says, all right, well, this Ensemble VM, which is kind of the parent, if you will. It's not really the same because it's a graph, not a hierarchical database. But this entity, the information about this entity is coming from VRNI, from VROps, and from VRA. And you can see they all have kind of their own, entity names and identifiers and so forth. But what that means is that if I want to get information from any of these, so let's say from vRealize operations, I want to get statistics from that, I can say, I can run a query directly from this API to give me information from the vRealize operations data about that virtual machine. So in other words, from this UI or from this API, I can get information from any of these services without going to, say, the VROps API or the VRNI API, et cetera. I can do it all from one place. So that is important to understand because, as Mike alluded to earlier, this is kind of the holy grail. So I've got one API that I can use to query and take actions from any of the vRealize products. And this also means that these vRealize products can now interact with each other through the Ensemble entity data service instead of directly to each other, so that we're all using that common data plane. Okay, so that's enough about the API. I know the APIs aren't necessarily fun for everybody, but hopefully that gives you a good idea of what the capabilities are there. Now, looking at the UI takes those applications, and here's a application view, okay, and it groups them by project. Now you'll see, in our little dev environment here, we've got a lot of applications that haven't been assigned to a project. For example, this one. But as an application owner, I could come in and say, oh yeah, this is actually my application. So I can curate that application and say this application actually belongs to this project. So let's say you have vRealize automation running in your environment, and you deployed some applications, from that. We'll recognize those, right? So we'll assign those projects will be leveled up, and those applications will be assigned to those projects. But then you may have applications that have been out there for some time and weren't deployed through VRA, just before VRA was implemented or whatever. They haven't been subsumed into the VRA management. You can make that change here. You can, more or less fix that and assign those to VRA projects, or, we'll just call them projects because now they're more of a global construct than just relegated to vRealize automation. So you can assign those here. If you needed to make changes to the application in terms of, there are other components that maybe VRNI hasn't yet discovered, et cetera, you can add those. And you'll notice too that the application itself is collecting information from vRealize operations regarding the infrastructure. And, again, we're looking at, basically beta code right now. We just entered private beta for this. So a lot of things may not be clickable or may not show any information, but the infrastructure information provided by vRealize operations, and then Network Insight would show any of the network information regarding that application. And then Ensemble will provide these intelligent insights based on the change feed that it's observing as it information is populated about that application and its related objects from the various services. You can see here, autoscaler event due to host failure is an example of an insight. Okay, it shows you the impact what's going to be impacted, capacity, performance, the level of that. We can also see things like properties. So there are properties that are coming from specific products like network insight. So again, back in the API, we were able to tap into that, and I could list out all the properties in the API, but basically it's showing the same thing here in the UI. This is where we're getting information about this application is from network insight. We see the number of tiers, the number of VMs associated with that. If there are any metrics available for this application, and then, list of connected resources, and I can navigate through that application. So here now are all the tiers of the application. This is, app tier, web tier, et cetera. And it shows me the VMs that are associated with that. And I can, again, continue to drill into those. And then each of these entities are going to have unique actions associated. So it's contextual. Everything you're seeing on the screen is contextual. And so, I can power this on. If it's off right now, it's powered off. So my only option here is to power on. I can't connect to remote console because it's off, and I can't power it off, obviously. And then this is that launching context. So let's say I am the infrastructure admin and I'm in Ensemble and I see, oh, this, has attention needed. There's some insight here. I want to get more information from the infrastructure perspective. And so I can launch in context. I'm not going to click this because I'm not 100% sure it will work in this staging version, but it would open that virtual machine in vRealize operations for me to, do more detailed investigation or interrogation into that. If we look at this from the infrastructure standpoint, so now my persona is, somebody that's interested. I'm a cloud admin or an infrastructure admin. Now I'm looking at, my top level components here or entities are my SDDCs. Okay, basically. So here's my on-prem vCenters. And again, I can see, the same type of information about those. I can take action on those. I can drill in and interrogate those. So I'm going down to the cluster and then down to the individual hosts and then down to the individual VMs. Okay. So you can see that I have, the ability to kind of look at those in a way that makes sense to me. You'll notice too that there are a lot of filtering capabilities here. So there's infrastructure filtered by show all and attention needed and so forth. Some of these aren't really working right now. I've got a search capability. What's really important to know about this search capability is that again shows the power of Ensemble as this unified data repository from all the products. So when I search here, I'm searching for a VM, let's say, I'm searching for that VM across all of the vRealize services, like literally show me everything that we know about this VM from VRA, VROps, et cetera. So this is a global search capability. And so this is a unique capability or new capability that's really added on top of the vRealize services that makes them, that gives a lot more value, quicker time to value, et cetera, for somebody that's using that. So we're almost at time. So I'll just kind of leave it there and see if there are any questions or discussion or comments from the from anyone really, customers or TAMs that are on, or Ellie.
After you walk through all of the questions, and this is a great opportunity to folks ask John, pick his brain while he's here with us. He is our expert.
Yeah, and I would just ask if, if anybody has any comments, what are your thoughts on this? Is this something that you can see your organization wanting to know more about or possibly adopting, or even interest in a beta participation would be good to know as well. Oh, Mike says they're all on mute. I'm okay with opening that up if if that's possible, Andy and Chris. I don't know if it
Hmm. Not sure, to be honest.
is.
There's a mute all button. Oh, here we can ask all to unmute. Here we
Or
go.
raise your hand. Yeah, click the raise hand.
Yeah.
I think I may have unmuted everybody, or at least given
Looks
the
like-
option to.
Oh, there's Mike.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, we
hey,
got you,
Mike.
Mike.
Hey, how's it going? So, John, I had an opportunity recently to check out your Postman collection for the VROPS APIs.
Yeah.
And you know, I've never been a programmer or coder, never will be. I'm a vSphere admin, and I'm sure there's thousands of us out there, right? And so the whole, you know, I struggle a lot with the API stuff. So that was my sort of the point of my question when you showed the query language there. And I was actually kind of bemused watching you struggle because it's hard, right? So
Yeah.
I kind of go, well, how are you going to make this easy for a vSphere administrator, somebody who's not used to coding and writing scripts, and really
Sure.
specifically things like even taking your Postman example, I wanted to then automate that. I wanted to create a single API call, you know, 20 times over. Well, how do you do that? You can't do it. Well, I don't know how to do it. So
Right,
I just want to
right.
encourage you guys to think about, you know, from a you know, stupid vSphere admin, if you want to call it that, and just how do I make this easy for these guys who don't know how to code at this point? And I mean, I think we're all
Yeah.
learning, but you know, make it easy for us, please.
No, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, and my background is not, you know, I share the same background as most of you, right? It's I was a vSphere admin and infrastructure storage admin and stuff like that, and using APIs is almost a necessity. It's becoming more and more of a necessity, right?
Agreed.
The number one use case that by far that customers have for the API, like the queries that I get, is I need to get information out of VROps to do something with it, right? Doesn't matter, but that's like 80% of what people want to use APIs for, at least for VROps and probably a lot of the other products as well. So I think, yeah, that's an important part of this GraphQL API. And I did struggle. We are, and I've report, you know, I'm working with product management and engineering. It's like, hey, this is kind of not clear or hard, and they very much want it to be, you know, you saw with the suggestions of like what to type next and so forth. We want to improve on that, you know, for the first phase of that, to make it super easy, you know, to even point out things like, hey, dummy, you know, instead of this weird, you know, message that I've got to decipher, hey, this is supposed to be a string value and you didn't put it in quotes, put it in quotes, you know, that type of thing, right? Or just pop up the quotes for me and I fill in the information. So we do want to make it super easy for your typical VMware administrator to use, because we do believe that it's important, which is why we're taking an API first approach. We do believe it is important to have, because of what we're doing with Ensemble, we believe it's important to provide that extensibility. And it's been something that's been requested, you know, for quite some time. It's like, hey, you've got all this great information. I just want to run a report against vRealize. I want a reporting engine for vRealize. I don't want to go run a report in VROps and then have to like enhance it with data from VRA through some magic scripts that I have to run, et cetera. So that's really what we're going for. And usability for the API itself is absolutely paramount for us. Nobody has the expectation that's like, this is for programmers, this is for developers, this is for vSphere, you know, VMware administrators, you know, your traditional bread and butter VMware user, if that makes sense. So we hear you. I think there was a question I saw from Chris about, okay, yeah, You want to get into the beta. I think you, Ellie, maybe you answered that.
Yeah, just send me an email. You can always send one to either John and I, but what we'll do is work back with the team. It's in a closed beta session right now by invite only, but we will open that up. And if folks are interested, by all means, let's take a look and see if you have the services, and we can go from there. So definitely let us know.
Yep, absolutely.
Any other questions? You can raise your hand. We can allow you to talk now that we've figured out this technology here. Hey, there's one. All right, let's see. Jason, you should be good to go, Jason.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Jason.
Hey, I just a quick comment. I know you said that the on-prem is not on roadmap, and I find that a little bit discouraging. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm alone in this, but with subscription-based systems like all the cloud stuff, we can't capitalize that. So therefore, I can't contribute budget to it. And so while I think this is a really cool technology, without being able to bring that on-prem, or until at least our accounting services change some of their rules,
Right.
it's going to stay out of reach. So, I mean, I would absolutely love to have a nice integration with all this metadata, but just wanted to point that out, that I'm sure I'm not alone in this, but there's a segment of the audience out here that this is going to block us from being able to use this technology.
Yeah, you're not. No, yeah, and that's. I mean, it's that's a great point. Thanks for bringing that up. But you're not alone, right? So I you know, candidly, we do hear that a lot. It's like, hey, we're not quite ready, right? And it. Well, I don't want to make any promises, but the VMware's approach, or specifically the cloud management BU, and I think it goes for all of VMware, is, you know, kind of a cloud first, right? If we continue to, you know, work on-prem first, we're going to get left in the dust, right? Our competitors are just going to be out ahead of us. So it's a critical balance, right, for a company like VMware that is transitioning to, you know, a provider of cloud services from, you know, the traditional perpetual licensing model on, you know, you download and install the software. And in a lot of cases, we still have our feet in both of the boxes, right? You know, you look at VROps and VROps Cloud. But from an innovation standpoint, and from the standpoint of being able to iterate very quickly on those innovations, it's really critical that we do it in the cloud first. That's not to say that something won't be available on-prem. I'd say it's pretty unlikely that newer services like Ensemble will be on-prem at some point. I don't see that. Then that's me personally, but it's not written in stone anywhere. It's all driven by you guys, by customer demand, right? So there's a ton of blockers for adoption because people just aren't ready. You know, then we'll have to figure, you know, VMware, you know, we'll have to figure that out, how to provide that service for you guys in a way that you can consume it. That makes sense for you.
I totally understand that, right? I don't think anybody's expecting on-prem to be your alpha and beta releases, right? As you say, it makes much more sense for you guys to do this development in the cloud, where you have a much greater flexibility and control over the environment, and able to do those rapid pushes, right? To get those feature sets out. It's just, well, at least with the other platforms, we operate on that expectation that eventually we'll get the new toys, but you're gonna test them out first, right? And that's perfectly fine, because our on-prem environments tend to be more static. They're less dynamic than cloud-based environments, because a lot of them are shackled to legacy and traditional methodologies, right? So it's just, as long as it's on the roadmap, that they keep some of us at least appeased. We know it's going to come eventually, but when we get questions or we get answers saying, no, it's not on the roadmap, you need to start thinking about subscription based, that leaves a segment of us in the dust because we simply can't, at least for the foreseeable future.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely understand. So yeah, I cannot make any predictions or promises about this service being on-prem, but again, we're we're revenue driven. So if there's some reason we're missing out on opportunities because we don't offer something on-prem, then that situation will have to rectify itself one way or the other, right? So that's, yeah, I totally understand. And you are definitely not, that's not an unheard of comment. So yeah.
All right, looks like things are quiet here. So with that, John, I'll thank you for the great presentation. It was really neat to see, the early beta here, but where this is going, and I can't wait to see the release product. And Ellie, thanks for being here with us today and handling the questions along the way. Really great presentation. As we mentioned at the beginning, this presentation was recorded, and your TAM will make that available to you. And please do join us for our next webinar on June 9th, where we'll dig deeper into VMware's DR offerings. All right, thank you much. Have a great rest of your day.